this sort of 45 stuff works out. If you imagine, like when I take this 45, really all this is 45 with footwork. I got my hips cocked, and notice this right here, this sort of center line piece right here, this little red piece. I've got my hands sort of oriented this way. I can either hit or I can block at this 45, but I'm also pivoted 45 here, so it makes me a harder target. I can use my shoulder to kind of go into, really, but it's all because of this footwork that allows that to happen, because I can be blocking and hitting, but I'm covering lots of things, like, but I notice I'm covering center line, but my hands are pointed 45 in towards their center line. See, I've kind of drawn like a 45-degree angle right here. I've drawn sort of a 45-degree angle here with my feet, and I'm even doing it with my knees and all this other bunch of stuff. You'll see a bunch of 45-degree angles and a bunch of like super particular moves. But notice like all my angles are still being drawn at this sort of centerline angle against my opponent. Doesn't matter. You can use sort of another helpful thing I like to visualize is this not only being the spine, like say it's someone's arm, right? And so that's sort of helpful in its own right, because say you're doing like a bar, instead of thinking just like a center line, you can use that ideology to like do grappling, bend stuff. You can use it for sort of practice that way. But really this works no different from a spine or like an arm or anything. It's really all the same stuff. Because you can kind of imagine how that works out, because there's a move in Filipino like stick fighting type stuff. It's Kali, and then like also in Sila, it's called Puta Kapala. It's literally just doing this little motion here. And all you think about it, and I'm gonna have to like kind of fabricate this, but you're just doing this. You can get the head at the back or whatever, but it's so that you can spin. I prefer the reverse version of it, where you grab this way and rotate. Sort of a bunch of different things like that. But what makes that better is if you can, when you're doing this, is to take a shift, because not only are you rotating here, you're rotating with your hands, which is it's 2 times the torque, and so it's 2 times the power. But you also maybe getting them while they're running a 45, so a 45 plus a bunch of torque plus your 45, it's going to just kind of increase speed and power. But just sort of, I guess, key to all of this is like a bunch of theory, honestly. It's like 0-point pressure, it's Wing Chun center line, it's boxing theory and shifting and stuff like this. Circles, triangles, and being able to cut all those in half, and circles and triangles contain 45 degrees and blah blah blah. Sounds like some conspiracy theory stuff, but really if you think about it, it's kind of the core of like sort of the mathematics of martial arts. If you think about it, just a bunch of 45 degrees is mostly what more superior angles are doing. And you'll see like a lot of practice, like even in Aikido, whenever they're doing like these little hand grippy thingies, whenever they're just sort of like doing demonstrations, you'll see them take a 45 and they're doing like this sort of motion. And if you notice, entirely what that is I stepped 45 and then I took my hands and I led to this 45 angle. So I'm covering sort of the 2 45 angles, and that's how they lead motion. And then what they'll do is sort of do like what Bagua does and sort of circle backwards to kind of guide motion, so they can get into a lock of some kind and gain control. And then the same thing, like I said, circles and triangles and cutting them in half. When it comes to these 45s here, whenever we create an elliptical motion, whenever we create sort of this elliptical motion, cutting it in half tends to either destroy a lock or destroy a grapple, or it destroys sort of, or it can even enhance your own. It really just depends. Because if I'm doing this, and it might generate more speed, because I might be able to whip it this way. Whereas like you'll see, like everybody knows that doing these round punches are kind of, but I mean it can work. But if you want it faster and sometimes more like precise, and you want more like technical stuff, you'll tend to like cut things in half. So instead of taking this round circular angle, you'll take like this rounded off 45 triangle sort of thing. But it's more elliptical because we're human and we don't do like very like super geometrical, perfect geometry stuff. Same when we do grapples. As if you think about wrist locks, a lot of wrist locking works because one, I'm able to like do this with their wrist and their hand, sort of make a 45 degree angle, and I'm also to pivot with my 45. And if I want to like drag them down, I might take another 45 and just sort of pull them out. And it works out because of how feet work. They're trying to find stability, and they're trying to find their own version of a 45. If they're like good fighters and they're good martial artists, because that's how you counter a lot of this stuff, is you just out 45 someone, or even with your hands and your feet and blah blah blah. But footwork drills, things you can do, really just practice doing this. Going backwards is helpful because you have to know how to pivot, because say there's like another person like in that angle right there, like Bob. And I can take this pivot here. Obviously, you don't want to necessarily turn your back to opponent, so say that's like these two right here. Notice they just kind of happen to draw like a massive triangle. We can find a way to generate like a 45, I guess. I'm in kind of perfect space, and this is sort of artificial, but notice I can take this right here, and I've generated some form of a triangle. That way I can kind of address both of them. Though they may come at different angles, I can shift 45 towards this dummy here to maybe drag into this person here and use them as their own shield. Sort of really that's how I orient myself, is really with shapes and 45-degree angles, and a lot of just that, circles, 45-degree angles, triangles, because even figure fours, they're triangles. A lot of like push hand stuff in Tai Chi, it's just a glorified circle almost, but more elliptical, but it's just a 45 to a 45 to another 45, and they're just doing this pushing motion, and they happen to do the yo-yo as well, this little bouncing move from Kali, because it's just an essential way to put it, but I learned yo-yo through Kali, so that's why I say yo-yo, but sort of that bouncing footwork. Even in boxing, whenever they're doing these jumping type things, when they're shifting and stuff like that, and when you're shadow boxing, that comes from a lot of like Silat stuff, and that comes from Kali, because in like original Queensberry rules, they didn't necessarily have that, because they sort of had this pugilistic look right here, but notice they still have like a very strong stance, and how they oriented themselves ends up being still 45-degree angles. The bobbing and weaving just comes later with like Filipino type stuff, and developed stuff from going to China and all that other stuff, and then they all influenced each other, because French boxing got their stuff from Chinese stuff, because they used to get on ships, their little hands would flail because they would like grab onto ship stuff, and so they would be doing kicks that way. Sort of the random history stuff, there you go. But even whenever we're doing like the figure four, it's just I'm making a bunch of 245s overlapping, and I'm taking a 45-degree step. Really, 45-degree is really like the godlike number. It will really help you with a lot. If you want to do like arm drags and stuff, you want to just create an elliptical motion with your hands, sort of in this, sort of like this right here. So what I'll do is I'll like maybe sort of curl this way, and I'll take a 45, and then what I'll do is I'll sort of draw that D shape, and I'll twirl it this way. That way it wrenches up a person's body sort of that way. I imagine, again, most things in shapes, and it helps me out quite a bit. And say like I'm like close up with someone, and I want to kind of just outbox them, because I'm like chest to chest, or like really close, maybe in like this range right here. Being able to take a shift 45 to wrench down on their weight and do like an elliptical motion over their arms or something to drag them down, so I can box or something, can be advantageous. But at the end of the day, it's someone who out 45s you who wins, or heck, even lucky. I mean, there's things that like people, they're the most untrained person, and they can just knock you clean out just because whatever. Either luck, or you just didn't see something coming, blindside, whatever. Just dumb luck, you slide or something. But even bringing your hands up can be a lot more simple if you're learning to take like these 45 steps, because it allows you to generate power from your hips and cock them upwards, so you can bring your hands up really fast. I mean, I'm not the fastest person, but that is like one way to generate upward energy. It's not necessarily upward energy, it's more energy and sort of like this kind of line from your hips generated this way. It's where I bring my hands up this way, and I can kind of shift my weight this way. You'll see sort of some people, they'll want to like torque their hand this way really fast. One that's happening because of a pivot, but it's like a very particular kind of pivot. Notice it's a yo-yo kind of mix where my heels are driving into the ground here, and I can snap this way. But at the same time, notice I'm oriented 45. I'm orienting 45 this way. I'm just changing 45-degree angles, so that's why you see people being able to really generate a lot of power this way. And you'll see them get a lot of speed. It's helpful to practice that if you have like a wall and then a wall, and then you just snap between it, and it helps you get your hand speed this way. You can do it with both hands. And then what changes that is being able to elliptic your spine, or like sort of do this kind of motion with your spine, sort of in a circular pattern. That's being able to be evasive, and it helps with like head movement. Because see, I can do this, but at the same time I can be using hands and stuff, and I can sort of be doing that. But notice I'm still taking the 45 shift with my feet, and I'm shifting this way, putting my hands somewhere. But this shift is happening because not only my footwork, but because I'm able to do this. Systema guys, they sort of practice doing this sort of stuff, like the belly dancing sort of stuff, where they do like this, and it's because they're trying to really like, it's kind of like an airbag. It works like an airbag for them, because when they get hit, they want to kind of just like flop over on it, or like kind of like cushion themselves to it. And Wing Chun will do it because they'll guide punches into them, and that's sort of how some of the Golden Bell stuff works in some Kung Fu styles. They'll kind of just they'll turn into like a cushion of some sort. And then there's other styles that kind of bridge their body out, and I mean that sort of helps with grappling as well. But neither here nor there. But anywho, this has all been about 45, less about footwork, I guess. I mean, it just all 45 stuff kind of generates into what 45 just sort of end up being everything in martial arts. If you kind of sort of think about it, it's sort of the most superior angle. You'll see it in architecture. A 90-degree angle is still just two 45s. You're obviously not going to get perfect in like the real world all the time, but it's just sort of like an ideal angle you can think of, because it helps with hooking, it helps with uppercuts and stuff like that. It helps with footwork. It helps you stepping off the line. It helps you think about how to deal with multiple people. Really, it's like a graph. I like to think about it like a Cartesian graph, or like XY coordinates. Just drawing a triangle, or as many triangles as you can, in like the weirdest way possible, except then it becomes linear algebra, because you're trying to sit there and do it in a 3-dimensional space instead of 2 dimensions. But it just helps to maybe pick plot points. Like I chose this thing center line earlier, and I chose that thing center line, and so I just try to draw a triangle, and I orient myself to the middle of that, so I kind of draw myself towards maybe the hypotenuse or something. But that's not always the case. It could just be equal side type triangle. Really, there's like numbers of ways to handle this. Sort of just been babbling and talking theory, but at the end of the day, you just gotta see what you can do at what 45-degree angle. And I think it's important to try to be ideal in the unideal. And what I mean by that is, say like you have your foot up or something, and you're like tipping this way in a weird sort of way. How do I orient myself to, get to where I need to be, or like be in more advantageous? I mean, that obviously depends on what's being thrown at me too, but I might want to do like a bog lost step, but it's still 45, or I'm tipping this way, and I might want to try to set my weight back this way, so that I can try to throw off their body or something. I don't know. It just really depends on their body orientation and a bunch of other things. But they may have stick or something. Nonetheless, you just want to try to generate a 45-degree angle. Like, again, I'm tipping maybe this way, and I maybe want to go this way, or that way, or that way, or that way, or even that way, whatever. I just need to be able to do this. But this opens up to me getting kicked in the crotch, and that's the only thing. Like, thinking of the long fist is the thing they worry about. I don't do iron crotch, so I try to avoid post out, unless like maybe the person's this way, and I can take like a shift, and I can maybe knee upwards. A little hoppy there. Because even things like Thai knees, they fly like a 45-degree V. And you can use that, really, if you think about it, even wedging is the same way. That's jamming and wedging are working because 45, because we can think about like the Tan Sao from Wing Chun, this sort of 45-degree angle, or I can bridge my way this way, it goes either way. But all you're doing is you're kind of projecting sort of a 45-degree angle at someone, and that's kind of how that works out. That's why Kensei Kyun works in Jeet Kune Do and in Wing Chun and other things, is because it's just intercepting the fist with like a wedge, and I'm just wedging this way. And your footwork's actually doing something similar. That's why, like I was saying, the 45 earlier, into people, you're actually wedging into them in like multiple angles. And as you know, like wedges just sort of like they peel up things, and they sort of help you bypass a lot of force. And it's sort of just a physical superior thing to do in, I guess, combat. There's loads of things you can say about this, but all I can do is put it on other people to say, hey, what would you do about this? And then, boom, I have to give an answer, but with my hands, obviously. Sort of, you got to figure out things. If I have to explain more, I would just, I don't know, send me a message and we'll figure it out. We'll figure something out and I'll try to explain what I can, make a video. Things are definitely, this is a lot of complicated stuff because I'm telling you put a bunch of triangles and a bunch of 45s in a bunch of different places. But at the end of the day, if you can cut up the most triangles in half or the most circles in half, you're probably going to be winning. Winning is a weird word, but you'll probably be having the more superior force if you can cut the most in half as opposed to your opponent. Okay, but all this is just 45-degree angles. Deuces.